They told you to always think positive, smile through the pain, pretend it's all okay, act like nothing bothers you. But what if I told you that's not the path to strength? What if I told you the real power lies in the opposite direction? Because sometimes positive thinking is a trap, a distraction, a lie we tell ourselves to avoid facing the raw, brutal truth. But negative thinking, it's real, it's raw, it's honest. And if you harness it correctly, it can be your greatest power. This isn't about being pessimistic. This isn't about drowning in your own misery. This is about turning the so-called bad thoughts into the fuel for greatness. Negative thinking is often misunderstood. It's been labeled as toxic, counterproductive, and even harmful. But the truth is, when used correctly, negative thinking is not a sign of weakness. It's a powerful mental strategy. It allows you to foresee potential failures, identify risks, and prepare yourself mentally and practically for what could go wrong. This is not about being pessimistic or expecting doom and gloom. It's about being realistic. It's about sharpening your mind like a blade, preparing it not just for success, but for the resistance success always brings. When people only focus on positive thinking, they often overlook dangers that are creeping in plain sight. They walk into battles with no armor because they believed their positive affirmations would be enough. But life doesn't reward blind faith. It rewards preparation. Negative thinking is your mental armor. It makes you ask hard questions. What if this doesn't work? What if I fail? What if they leave me? What if I lose everything? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are necessary. Because in answering them, you don't become more fearful, you become more strategic. Imagine an athlete preparing for a championship. If they only imagine winning the gold medal, they might feel inspired, but they won't be ready when something unexpected happens. But if that same athlete visualizes the opponent's strongest moves, imagine slipping up, falling behind, or losing momentum, they are forced to train harder, prepare smarter, and become adaptable. That's the hidden advantage of negative thinking. It pushes you beyond comfort. It keeps your eyes open. It helps you build a plan not just for victory, but for survival and recovery in case of setbacks. Negative thinking gives you a mental map of the battlefield. It doesn't just show you the destination. It shows you the traps, the detours, and the threats along the way. It helps you identify the cracks in your foundation before they become disasters. It helps you spot the red flags in relationships, the weaknesses in your business model, the flaws in your character, the blind spots in your plan. And once you see them, you can fix them. The reason most people fail isn't because they didn't dream big enough. It's because they didn't prepare deeply enough. They got hit with something they didn't see coming. Negative thinking gives you that foresight. It allows you to mentally simulate failure without actually experiencing it. And once you've played it out in your mind, once you've felt that sting of losing, being embarrassed, falling short, your system is no longer shocked when challenges appear. You've trained for them. This mindset isn't just powerful, it's essential, especially in today's world where challenges are more complex, distractions are everywhere, and life can change in an instant. You can't afford to be mentally fragile. You can't rely on good vibes only. You need a mindset that can handle storms, one that doesn't fall apart when life doesn't follow your script. And that mindset is built when you embrace the hard questions, when you think in detail about what could go wrong, not to scare yourself, but to strengthen yourself. The key is not to let negative thinking consume you, but to let it guide you. It's like holding a flashlight in the dark. You're not focused on the light just to feel good. You're using it to spot the holes, the edges, the risks. And that's what sharpens your edge. That's what separates wishful dreamers from disciplined doers. Negative thinking gives you structure. It forces you to back up your ambition with preparation. It brings clarity, not confusion, in your relationships, in your career, in your health, and in your personal growth. This mindset gives you the edge. You don't get blindsided by betrayal because you had the wisdom to notice what most ignore. You don't collapse under pressure because you've visualized pressure and trained for it. You don't lose everything and fall apart because you've considered the possibility of loss and taken action to prevent or recover from it. That's not fear-driven living. That's fearless preparation. Fear and doubt have been demonized by motivational culture for far too long. People are constantly told to eliminate fear or ignore doubt, as if these emotions are diseases rather than essential parts of the human experience. But the truth is, fear and doubt are not enemies to be destroyed. They are tools to be understood. They are the body's way of alerting you to threats, weaknesses, and blind spots. When you try to erase them, you don't become braver, you become blind. Fear and doubt are there to keep you awake, to sharpen your mind, and to challenge your assumptions. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. That sensation in your gut, that quickened heartbeat, that voice in your head saying, "Be careful," that's fear doing its job. It's not there to paralyze you. It's there to prevent you from falling. It's there to make you take a step back, assess your footing, calculate the risk, and then decide your next move with clarity. Without fear, you'd walk blindly off the edge. And without doubt, you'd never question whether the direction you're heading in is actually the right one. Doubt isn't the voice of defeat. It's the voice of refinement. It forces you to revisit your strategy. It asks, are you ready? Are you being honest with yourself? Are you prepared for what lies ahead? It's uncomfortable, yes, but it is also necessary. If you silence that voice completely, you might feel confident, but your confidence will be hollow because you never stopped to test it. You never challenged it. Real confidence is not the absence of doubt. It's the mastery of doubt. It's knowing how to listen to it, take from it what's useful, and then move forward stronger than before. Fear works the same way. It shows up when you're facing something new, uncertain, or dangerous. It heightens your senses. It makes you alert. And that alertness is a gift. It can save you from disaster. It can push you to study harder, train longer, or think more critically. The problem isn't fear itself. It's the way people respond to it. Most people either let fear control them or try to bury it beneath fake positivity. But there's a third way. You can use fear. You can turn it into fuel. Think of the great performers, athletes, leaders, and visionaries. Almost all of them felt fear before taking a major step. They felt doubt before launching something bold. But what separated them wasn't that they were fearless. It was that they didn't run from those emotions. They listened to them, learned from them, and then acted with wisdom and courage. Fear said, "Are you ready?" And they responded by preparing. Doubt said, "What if this doesn't work?" And they responded by building a better plan. When fear and doubt speak, it's a signal that you're stepping into territory that matters. It means you care. It means you're pushing boundaries. If you never felt them, it would mean you're stuck in a comfort zone, and no one grows in the comfort zone. Growth begins the moment fear shows up. Growth begins when doubt whispers in your ear and you lean in, not away. The most powerful people are not the ones who never feel fear. They're the ones who have a relationship with it. They respect it, but they're not controlled by it. The mind wants to protect you. That's why fear and doubt exist in the first place. But you must teach your mind that you're not looking to avoid danger. You're looking to grow. You're looking to evolve. So instead of silencing fear, ask it what it's trying to tell you. Instead of resenting doubt, interrogate it. Find the truth inside of it. Maybe it's showing you a weak point in your plan. Maybe it's revealing something you missed. That doesn't mean stop, it means strengthen. The world will always tell you to be fearless, but fear is a compass. It points to what matters. Doubt is a mirror. It reflects what needs attention. Together, they can become allies in your evolution. You just have to stop running from them. The problem is never the feeling. The problem is your relationship with the feeling. Change that and you change everything. Fear and doubt, when embraced with wisdom, become your greatest teacher. They guide you to become sharper, smarter, and more resilient than ever before. Positive thinking has become a mantra repeated so often that it's almost unquestioned. We're told to focus only on the good, to visualize success, and to believe everything will work out. While there's undeniable value in optimism, relying on positive thinking alone can be dangerously deceptive. It can create a mental bubble that blinds you to reality. You start to overlook the warning signs, ignore the risks, and underestimate the obstacles. You become so attached to the idea of success that you stop preparing for failure. And when reality finally strikes, it hits 10 times harder because you were never mentally ready for it. Positive thinking can seduce you into comfort. It tells you that your dreams are enough, that believing is the same as building, that vision is enough to manifest victory. But success doesn't work like that. Life doesn't care how optimistic you are. It cares how prepared you are. Positive thinking without preparation is like walking into a battlefield with a smile and no armor. You can feel good. You can even feel confident. But when the pressure comes, when the storm hits, your mindset collapses because it was built on fantasy, not facts. When people constantly focus on the bright side, they start to avoid anything that feels uncomfortable. They silence doubt, dismiss fear, and reject criticism, all in the name of protecting their peace. But in doing so, they shut out the very information that could save them. Criticism reveals weakness. Doubt exposes gaps. Fear points to what matters. When you block all of that out, you start building your life on illusion. You become so focused on thinking positive that you ignore the problems growing under the surface. And then one day, those problems explode. Blind positivity is not strength, it's denial. And denial is the enemy of growth. Growth only happens when you confront reality, when you look directly at the things that scare you, when you admit that not everything is going according to plan, when you face the hard truth that sometimes belief alone isn't enough. You need skill, strategy, discipline, and resilience. Those things aren't built through feel-good mantras. They're built by going to war with your weaknesses. And that war starts with honesty, not illusion. Positive thinking tells you to assume the best. But what if the best doesn't happen? What if the opportunity fails? What if you make the wrong choice? What if the people you trust betray you? If you haven't allowed those questions into your mind, you won't know what to do when life delivers the opposite of what you hoped for. That's when people break. That's when the motivational speeches stop working. That's when the affirmations lose power. Because they never developed the mental toughness that comes from acknowledging what could go wrong. Real confidence is built when you balance optimism with realism. When you can say, I believe I can win, but I know exactly what I'll do if I don't. That's the mindset that survives. That's the mindset that builds something sustainable. It's not about being negative for the sake of being negative. It's about using critical thinking to protect your mission. It's about acknowledging that not every door will open, not every plan will succeed, and not every person will support you, and preparing for that reality without losing your drive. The danger of positive thinking alone is that it can make you emotionally fragile. When something doesn't go your way, you feel betrayed, you feel blindsided, you start to question everything, including your worth. But if you had allowed room for negative thinking, if you had mentally explored the possibility of failure, then you would have been able to recover faster, smarter, and stronger. You would have had a plan. You would have had perspective. Positive thinking tells you everything will go right. Negative thinking prepares you for when it doesn't. The most resilient people aren't those who believed everything would be easy. They're the ones who anticipated the struggle and got strong anyway. They're the ones who embraced reality instead of hiding from it. They're the ones who didn't need the world to be perfect in order to stay focused and motivated. They built their mindset not just to inspire, but to endure. And that mindset is born when you allow yourself to think about the dark side, not to dwell in it, but to conquer it. Positive thinking may get you started, but without the grounding force of realism and the sharp edge of preparation, it won't carry you through the fight. We live in a world that glorifies speed, hustle, and achievement. Yet, ironically, the most successful individuals are often the ones who slow down and think deeply. They take time to reflect, to anticipate, to strategize, not because they doubt themselves, but because they know the cost of moving blindly. Deep thinking is not a delay tactic, it's a weapon. And negative thinking, when used wisely, fuels that depth. It forces you to examine every angle, to question your assumptions, and to see the parts of the picture that optimism tends to blur out. It creates a depth of awareness that gives you an edge others don't even know they're missing. When you allow yourself to think negatively, you open up a level of strategic thinking that most people never touch. You stop rushing toward outcomes and start analyzing the terrain. You ask yourself, where could this go wrong? Not to plant fear in your mind, but to identify the landmines before you step on them. You don't want to walk blindly into traps disguised as opportunities. You want to see the danger before it becomes damage. Negative thinking sharpens your senses. It forces your brain out of autopilot. It keeps you alert to patterns, to inconsistencies, to the small details that often predict big problems. Strategic thinking requires mental stamina, and negative thinking builds that stamina. It's easy to think about what you want. It's harder to think about what you're missing. It takes discipline to ask, what am I not seeing? What am I avoiding? What have I overlooked? Those are the questions that save you time, money, energy, and heartbreak. And the people who think this way aren't living in fear. They're living in wisdom. They know that life doesn't always go according to plan, and so they create multiple plans. They anticipate outcomes, both good and bad. They don't bet everything on one path. They build a system that can adapt and evolve. In business, in relationships, in your personal growth, the ability to see ahead is what sets you apart. That foresight is built when you challenge your own beliefs. When you don't just fall in love with your idea, you interrogate it. You don't just assume you'll succeed, you build layers of protection in case you do. That's not being negative for the sake of it. That's building a mental fortress. That's what allows you to move with confidence because you've already walked through the fire in your mind and you're ready for whatever shows up. Most people avoid negative thinking because it feels heavy. It demands mental effort. It forces them to slow down, to stop being intoxicated by motivation, and to get serious about execution. But this depth is what separates wishful thinkers from strategic executors. Anyone can dream, anyone can set goals, but few people take the time to sit in silence and do the mental work of identifying risks, preparing for failure, and adapting in advance. That work is not glamorous, it's not loud, but it's powerful. When you cultivate deep thinking, fueled by a willingness to confront the negative, you begin to notice what others ignore. You see the weakness in a business deal that everyone else calls perfect. You see the cracks in a relationship that others romanticize. You see the false promises hidden in opportunities that seem too good to be true. This level of clarity doesn't come from endless positivity. It comes from stepping back and letting your mind explore the possibilities, both beautiful and brutal. There's a reason why the most effective leaders in history weren't just optimistic visionaries. They were master strategists. They didn't just see what they wanted. They saw what could go wrong, and they prepared accordingly. They surrounded themselves with people who challenged their ideas, not just those who agreed. They asked hard questions and made hard decisions, not because they didn't believe in themselves, but because they believed in preparation over hope. They understood that the future belongs to those who are ready for it in all its forms, not just the parts that are easy to digest. Depth of thinking gives you a mental shield. It makes you less reactive and more deliberate when setbacks happen, and they always do. You don't crumble, you pivot. Because you've already seen this play out in your mind. You've already visualized the worst. So when it shows up, you're calm, you're sharp, and you're ready. Negative thinking doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you prepared. It doesn't make you weaker. It makes your strategy smarter. And in a world full of distractions and delusions, that kind of deep mental clarity is a rare and powerful advantage. Most people want growth, but they don't want discomfort. They want change, but they don't want to challenge themselves. They desire progress, but only if it comes wrapped in ease and positivity. What they fail to understand is that true growth demands friction, resistance, and honest confrontation with the self. Negative thinking plays a crucial role in this process because it brings your flaws into the light. It doesn't coddle you. It confronts you. It says, here's where you're failing. Here's where you're not good enough yet. Here's what you've been ignoring. And though it's uncomfortable, it's exactly what pushes you to evolve. People often talk about personal development as if it's all about motivation and affirmations. But that's only the surface. Real transformation happens when you're forced to face your weaknesses head on. It happens when negative thoughts challenge your self-image and force you to dig deeper. When a voice in your head tells you you're not disciplined, or you're making excuses, or you're wasting time, your instinct might be to shut it down. But if you lean into it and ask, is this true? You give yourself the opportunity to break through self-deception. And without breaking through self-deception, you will always stay stuck in cycles that sabotage your own success. The negative thinking becomes your greatest teacher when you stop taking it personally and start using it as a diagnostic tool. It's like holding a mirror up to your blind spots. It doesn't sugarcoat, it doesn't flatter, it doesn't care about your ego, it cares about your evolution. It's that internal force that pushes you to read one more book, to train a little harder, to stop procrastinating, to say no to distractions, and to finally admit that your habits aren't aligned with your goals. It's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to wake you up. Growth never comes from staying comfortable. It comes from friction, the mental and emotional tension of realizing you could be better and choosing to act on it. The discomfort of negative thinking is like the burn of a workout. It's painful, but it's purposeful. It tears down the old version of you so the stronger version can rise. And just like building muscle, building mental and emotional strength requires breaking down what's weak so you can rebuild it with intent. That process is not easy, but it is transformative. The people who run from negativity often get stuck repeating the same patterns year after year. They avoid hard truths, so they never fix the root of their problems. They surround themselves with voices that only encourage them, never challenge them. And they confuse temporary comfort with progress. But if you want to be the kind of person who grows in a meaningful and lasting way, you have to embrace the tension. You have to listen to that critical voice, not to let it bully you, but to let it show you where the work needs to be done. This kind of growth isn't glamorous. It's not the kind you post on social media. It's internal. It's quiet. It happens in the moments when no one's watching, when you choose discipline over laziness, truth over denial, and accountability over blame. And it's powered by the courage to look at yourself with brutal honesty. That courage comes from accepting the role of negative thinking in your life, not as a constant presence of despair, but as a trigger for transformation, as a mental tool that exposes what's keeping you small so you can step into something bigger. Everyone says they want to level up, but few are willing to go through the internal battle it requires. Growth is not about making yourself feel good. It's about making yourself better. That means embracing the thoughts that challenge your identity, your routines, and your excuses. It means seeing negative thinking not as a flaw, but as a form of feedback. It's the part of your mind that's trying to push you past your limitations, not because you're broken, but because you're capable of more. And it won't let you settle. If you only listen to positive thoughts, you'll only stay where it's safe. But if you dare to listen to the voice that questions your comfort, your confidence, your commitment, you'll find the power to grow beyond anything you thought possible. You'll become the kind of person who doesn't just survive life's challenges, but evolves through them. That kind of growth isn't born in comfort. It's born in the fire. And negative thinking is the spark that starts it. We often hear that fear is something to be eliminated, something that holds us back and must be conquered. But fear, when understood properly, is not your enemy. It's a messenger, a signal, and at times a motivator more powerful than hope. Most people try to suppress their fears through forced positivity, telling themselves everything will be fine, ignoring the warning signs and pretending the risks don't exist. But fear exists for a reason. It's designed to alert you, to wake you up, to force you to pay attention. When you embrace fear instead of running from it, it sharpens your instincts. It makes you alert. It makes you cautious in the best way. It doesn't paralyze you. It protects you. Fear shows you what matters. You're not afraid of things that are meaningless. You fear failure because success means something to you. You fear rejection because connection matters. You fear losing because winning has value. Instead of seeing fear as a sign of weakness, view it as a signpost. It's showing you the areas of life where your heart is invested. It's revealing what you care about. And that's exactly where your growth lies. Most people try to overcome fear by silencing it. But the real power comes when you listen to it and let it guide your preparation. Fear is not just about anxiety. It's about awareness. When you're afraid of failing, you double check your work. When you're afraid of wasting time, you start prioritizing what matters. When you're afraid of disappointing someone, you start performing at a higher level. When used correctly, fear becomes a motivator that fuels discipline. It becomes the pressure that keeps you from becoming careless or complacent. It keeps you alert to your surroundings, sharpens your focus, and reminds you that your actions have consequences. The reason fear becomes toxic for most people is because they try to fight it blindly. They suppress it instead of managing it. They allow it to grow in the shadows of their minds instead of putting it under a light. But when you bring fear out of the darkness, when you look it in the face and start asking the right questions, why am I afraid of this? What's the worst case scenario? How can I prepare myself? You take back control. You take the unknown and make it manageable. You convert raw fear into a strategy. That's the power of negative thinking. It allows you to transform fear into fuel. Some of the most successful people in the world didn't rise because they had no fear. They rose because their fear drove them. The fear of failure pushed them to prepare harder than anyone else. The fear of poverty drove them to learn how money works. The fear of being average drove them to master their craft. They didn't romanticize fear, but they didn't ignore it either. They acknowledged it, studied it, and turned it into a source of energy. That kind of clarity and drive doesn't come from pretending everything is okay. It comes from being brutally honest about what you're afraid of and using that as a reason to grow stronger. Fear also helps you evaluate risk. Positive thinking alone could make you blind to danger. It can make you believe that just because you want something badly enough, it's bound to happen. But fear gives you a reality check. It forces you to ask, what could go wrong and am I ready for it? That doesn't make you a pessimist. It makes you smart. It means you're not walking into the future unarmed. You're not just hoping for the best, you're planning for the worst while still aiming for the best. That balance is where real confidence comes from. Fear is also an early warning system. Before your life falls apart, fear often whispers that something's off. Before you get betrayed, fear hints at the red flags. Before you fail, fear tries to tell you where the cracks are. But if you're too caught up in positive thinking, if you refuse to feel anything unpleasant, you'll miss those signals. You'll mistake ignorance for peace. And then, when things go wrong, it feels like a surprise. But it wasn't a surprise, you just weren't listening. You had the emotional volume turned down too low to hear what fear was trying to say. Instead of trying to eliminate fear, learn to respect it. Not all fear is irrational. Sometimes it's the most rational thing in the world. It's your subconscious trying to protect you from walking into a situation unprepared. Fear can point out the flaws in your plan, the holes in your logic, the weaknesses in your routine. It can show you exactly what needs to be fixed if you're willing to look. And when you do that, fear stops being something that holds you back. It becomes something that pushes you forward with greater precision, urgency, and awareness. There's a certain kind of wisdom that only comes from sitting in silence, staring your failures in the face and asking, what did I miss? Most people avoid that moment. They'd rather blame circumstances, point fingers, or drown the discomfort in distraction. But those who allow themselves to dwell in the discomfort, who aren't afraid to mentally replay the painful moments, are the ones who truly grow. Negative thinking isn't just about anticipating future problems. It's also about revisiting past mistakes, not to dwell in regret, but to extract the lessons buried in the pain. Every failure leaves behind a blueprint, a map of what not to do, what to do better, what to never repeat. But you can only read that map if you're willing to look back without sugarcoating what happened. Mistakes are the most honest feedback you will ever receive. They don't lie to you. They don't flatter you. They expose what your habits, decisions, and blind spots really cost you, but only if you're brave enough to study them. Negative thinking gives you that bravery. It removes the illusion of perfection and forces you to accept that you're flawed. And that's not a weakness. It's an opportunity. Because the moment you stop pretending everything's fine is the moment you can finally start building something real. Looking back with critical eyes isn't about beating yourself up. It's about holding yourself accountable. It's about making sure that the pain wasn't wasted. When you experience a setback and immediately jump into positive thinking, you miss the reflection. You miss the insights. You cover the wound with a smile instead of cleaning it out and letting it heal properly. That's how people end up making the same mistakes again and again, changing jobs but repeating the same toxic behaviors, starting new relationships with the same unresolved wounds, setting new goals with the same old discipline issues. But when you stop and look at what went wrong through the lens of negative thinking, you start seeing patterns. You start recognizing that it wasn't just bad luck. It was poor decision-making. It wasn't just someone else's fault. It was your lack of boundaries. It wasn't just circumstances. It was your avoidance of the hard choices. Negative thinking forces you to ask the questions that most people are too scared to face. What role did I play in this failure? What signs did I ignore? Where did I choose comfort over growth? These questions aren't fun. They're not the kind that give you instant relief, but they're the ones that lead to transformation. Because the moment you take ownership of the past is the moment you regain control of the future. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming a student of experience. The most powerful people you'll ever meet aren't the ones who've never failed. They're the ones who've failed hard but learned even harder. They've been through pain, but they didn't waste it. They dissected it. They let it shape them, refine them, prepare them. They didn't rush to forget. They chose to remember on purpose because they understood that success isn't built by avoiding mistakes. It's built by analyzing them. You don't grow by pretending everything's okay. You grow by confronting what went wrong and deciding it won't happen again. That decision is born from negative thinking, from honest self-assessment, from the willingness to mentally relive what most people try to bury. This process is never easy. It requires humility. It requires the courage to sit with discomfort instead of distracting yourself with motivational noise. But the reward is clarity. You begin to move through life with greater awareness. You make decisions not just based on what feels good, but on what works. You develop a sixth sense for danger because you've trained yourself to recognize the early signs of failure. You stop repeating the past because you've already studied it in depth. Negative thinking gives you the mental tools to deconstruct failure and use it as raw material for your next level. It's the act of turning loss into leverage, pain into precision, regret into resolve. Everyone talks about bouncing back, but not everyone knows how. Most people bounce back emotionally without bouncing back intelligently. They try to rebuild their life on the same weak foundation. But if you take the time to use negative thinking, to honestly evaluate what crumbled, why it crumbled, and how you contributed to it, you don't just rebuild, you build better. You build stronger. You build with wisdom instead of wounds, and you stop fearing failure because you've learned how to turn it into fuel. It's easy to think that everyone around you has it figured out, that their confidence is real, that their smile is genuine, that their success is effortless. But the truth is, most people are wearing masks. They're carrying insecurities, fears, and anxieties they'll never show. And while the world promotes the image of confidence and strength, deep down, many are cracking under the pressure of pretending. This is where negative thinking gives you an edge, not because it feeds insecurity, but because it exposes the gap between the image and the reality. When you allow yourself to question your own mindset, when you strip away the false confidence and confront your doubts, you're not becoming weaker. You're becoming honest. And honesty is the foundation of true self-confidence. Most people try to build confidence by repeating affirmations, dressing better, or faking it until they make it. But if the core is weak, if the inner dialogue is still full of doubt and fear, it doesn't matter how good the exterior looks. It's all temporary. Negative thinking forces you to confront the cracks before they break you. It makes you ask the hard questions. Am I really prepared? Do I actually know what I'm doing? Am I hiding behind charm, or have I put in the work? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they're also liberating, because once you face the truth, you stop needing to pretend. You stop living for validation and start building from reality. There's something powerful about someone who doesn't lie to themselves. They may not be loud, they may not be flashy, but they are grounded. That grounding comes from having wrestled with their inner demons, having questioned their motives, having walked through the mental fog of doubt and come out clearer on the other side. That's what negative thinking does. It strips away the fluff. It clears out the mental noise that says, just be positive, and instead forces you to get real, to dig deep, to confront what you've been avoiding. And in that confrontation, something shifts. You stop performing and start preparing. You stop seeking praise and start seeking mastery. Insecurity thrives in people who never question themselves. They assume the loudest voice in their head must be right. But often, it's not the voice of wisdom. It's the echo of past failures, fears, and unmet expectations. Negative thinking interrupts that cycle. It says, what if this belief is wrong? It challenges your assumptions. It asks you to prove to yourself why you feel the way you do. And in doing that, it brings clarity. It exposes where your fears are irrational and where your weaknesses are real. That kind of clarity becomes a weapon. It allows you to walk into any room, not with arrogance, but with the calm of someone who knows exactly what they bring to the table and what they don't. This inner confidence isn't built overnight. It's built in quiet moments when no one is watching. When you sit with your insecurities instead of distracting yourself, when you choose self-awareness over self-deception. It's built when you stop pretending to be strong and actually start becoming strong. That strength comes from facing your doubts, not running from them. It comes from listening to the voice that says, you're not ready. That response, that mindset is forged through honest reflection, through the kind of thinking most people avoid because it doesn't feel good in the short term. But in the long run, it's what separates those who are merely surviving from those who are truly evolving. You don't need to be perfect to be confident. You just need to be real. And realness comes from truth. Negative thinking forces truth. It removes the filters. It shows you what needs work. It doesn't let you hide behind temporary highs or shallow motivation. It pulls you back to center and reminds you that your value isn't based on image, but on substance. The more you engage with your insecurities directly, the less power they have over you. You become the kind of person who walks through fear, not because you're fearless, but because you've studied your fear so well it no longer controls you. That kind of confidence isn't loud, it's unshakable. It's not built on illusions. It's built on a foundation of self-awareness and honesty. Most people think confidence is about convincing others you're enough. But real confidence is about convincing yourself that you can handle the truth. That even if you're not where you want to be, you have what it takes to get there. That mindset doesn't come from avoiding negative thoughts. It comes from walking through them, dissecting them, and transforming them into self-understanding. When you stop fearing the darkness in your mind and start exploring it, you begin to build an identity rooted not in external approval, but in inner strength. And that strength can't be faked. It's earned through every hard conversation you have with yourself, every doubt you confront, and every moment you choose truth over comfort. We're taught that being negative is a weakness, that expressing doubt or fear is a sign of failure, that showing emotional pain makes you look broken. But the truth is, hiding your pain doesn't make you strong. It makes you fragile. Real strength is built when you allow yourself to feel everything, even the thoughts and emotions that society tells you to suppress. Negative thinking gives you access to your inner world in a way that blind positivity never can. It reveals what's unresolved. It shines a spotlight on what's still hurting. And instead of covering those wounds with forced optimism, it invites you to heal them from the inside out. That process isn't glamorous. It's raw. It's uncomfortable, but it's where transformation truly begins. The reason so many people walk around feeling numb or disconnected is because they've spent years building emotional walls instead of foundations. They've avoided the pain instead of understanding it. But pain doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It waits, it lingers, and eventually it shows up in your relationships, your health, your work, your choices. Negative thinking gives you the tools to confront that pain, not to dwell in it, but to work through it. When you allow yourself to sit with uncomfortable thoughts instead of distracting yourself from them, you gain insight. You begin to understand why you react the way you do, why certain things trigger you, why you've developed certain patterns of avoidance, perfectionism, or people-pleasing. This is the kind of mental work that no one sees. It doesn't show up in your resume. It doesn't win you applause, but it changes everything. Because once you've made peace with your own darkness, you stop fearing other people's opinions. You stop needing approval. You stop chasing validation. You learn to be at home within yourself, even in the mess, even in the uncertainty. That emotional resilience doesn't come from positive mantras. It comes from doing the work that most people run from. It comes from sitting down with your fear and saying, talk to me. From looking at your past and saying, what are you still trying to teach me? From asking yourself not just what you want in life, but what you're still holding on to that's preventing you from getting there. Negative thinking isn't about being pessimistic. It's about being precise. It cuts through denial. It pulls back the curtain on your emotional state and gives you a mirror, not a mask. And when you look into that mirror, when you're honest about your flaws, your insecurities, your pain, that's when real emotional growth begins. Because now you're not just reacting to life, you're responding with awareness. You're not controlled by your emotions, you're learning from them. That shift is everything. It turns breakdowns into breakthroughs. It turns inner chaos into inner clarity. The truth is, emotional strength isn't built in the sunshine. It's built in the storms. In those moments when everything feels uncertain, when nothing seems to make sense, when your mind is filled with negative thoughts and emotions, that's where the opportunity lies, not in escaping the storm, but in learning how to stand in it, to face the wind and the rain and say, I'm still here. That's what resilience looks like. That's what emotional strength feels like. And the only way to get there is to stop avoiding the discomfort and start moving through it. Not around it, through it. Most people are afraid of what they'll find if they go too deep into their own mind. They're scared that the sadness will swallow them, that the fear will paralyze them, that the doubt will define them. But that fear is only powerful because it's been unexamined. The moment you bring it into the light, when you write it down, speak it aloud, sit with it instead of running from it, it loses its grip on you. You realize that your emotions aren't your enemy, they're messengers. And negative thinking is how you learn to interpret those messages with wisdom instead of resistance. There's a kind of healing that only happens when you let yourself break. When you stop pretending to be okay and admit, this hurts, this scares me, this makes me angry. Not because you want to stay in that place, but because you know you can't move forward until you've acknowledged where you really are. That's the first step, and it takes courage. Far more courage than smiling when you want to cry or pretending to be strong when you feel weak. Negative thinking gives you that courage. It tells you the truth about where you stand, even when it's not pretty, even when it's not what you wanted to hear. But from that place of truth, you can finally begin the work of real emotional transformation. Not the kind that looks good from the outside, but the kind that liberates you from within. The world tells you to chase happiness, to smile more, to always look on the bright side. But sometimes chasing happiness becomes a trap. Sometimes forcing yourself to be positive in every situation only masks the real issues that need attention. That's where negative thinking steps in, not to pull you into darkness, but to wake you up from illusions. When you allow yourself to examine the worst case scenarios, to ask the difficult questions, to face the ugly truths, you're not inviting despair. You're building clarity. You begin to see things as they truly are, not just as you wish them to be. And in that clarity, a different kind of focus is born. You stop wasting energy chasing temporary highs or running from uncomfortable realities. You begin to think critically, plan strategically, and act deliberately. So many people live in a loop of false optimism. They push down their anxiety with empty affirmations. They avoid confrontation because they don't want to disturb their peace. But real peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from alignment. And alignment only happens when you stop lying to yourself about what's working and what's not. Negative thinking is the flashlight that reveals what's broken so you can fix it. It tells you the hard truths no one else wants to say out loud, that your routine is keeping you stuck, that your relationships are draining you, that your goals are based on ego instead of purpose. These aren't fun realizations, but they're necessary because clarity is what frees you to focus on what really matters. Focus is not just about blocking out distractions. It's about cutting through the noise inside your own head. And that noise often comes from unresolved fears, unchecked assumptions, and unchallenged beliefs. Negative thinking clears the fog by forcing you to look at your thought patterns with brutal honesty. Why are you afraid to fail? Why do you keep sabotaging your progress? Why do you keep saying no when you want to say no? When you start asking these kinds of questions, your mental landscape begins to shift. You stop looking for shortcuts. You stop lying to yourself, and you start building a mindset rooted in discipline, purpose, and authenticity. People often confuse clarity with certainty, but they are not the same. Certainty says, I know exactly what will happen. Clarity says, I see the situation clearly, even if the outcome is uncertain. That difference is critical because life rarely gives you certainty, but it will reward you for clarity. Clarity helps you make better decisions, cut ties when you need to, and commit fully when the path aligns with your deeper values. And clarity, more often than not, comes through the process of examining what you fear, what you avoid, and what you resist. That's the role of negative thinking. It sharpens your awareness by confronting what positive thinking tries to ignore. Imagine trying to navigate a stormy sea with a map that only shows sunny skies. That's what purely positive thinking is like. It creates a false sense of security that can leave you unprepared for real challenges. But if your map shows the whole picture, the dangers, the storms, the obstacles, you're not only better prepared, you're more focused. You know where to steer, what to avoid, and when to stay still. That kind of navigation requires negative thinking. It requires the willingness to see problems before they become crises, to recognize weak spots before they collapse, and to adapt before it's too late. That's not negativity, it's intelligence. Some of the most successful and resilient people in the world are not blindly optimistic. They are critical thinkers. They look at every scenario and ask what could go wrong, not because they want it to, but because they want to be ready if it does. That mindset doesn't lead to fear, it leads to focus. It leads to preparation, strategy, and mental sharpness. And that focus, grounded in realism, becomes their competitive edge. While others are busy hoping things work out, they're building systems to ensure they do. That's the power of mentally embracing the negative. It pushes you to solve problems before they arise, to tighten the slack, to face reality head on with eyes wide open. Focus thrives in truth, and truth is rarely soft and easy. It's often uncomfortable, inconvenient, and complex, but it's also liberating. Because once you stop denying the hard stuff, once you stop sugarcoating the facts, your mind becomes laser sharp. You know what needs to be done, and you stop procrastinating. You stop entertaining distractions. You stop settling. You start moving with precision. You start choosing your battles. You start respecting your time and your energy. And you start demanding that every thought, every decision, every action serves the bigger picture of your life. That's the kind of clarity and focus that only negative thinking can build, not because it traps you in darkness, but because it shows you how to find the light without lying about the shadows.